Hello from Tokyo, Japan. Today, we are not talking about resolutions. I just really don't love the idea of showing up to a new year and focusing on all of the ways that I am deficient as a person. And this is actually coming from somebody who used to be a hyper resolution person. I have a very, very long history of reinventing myself, and that is honestly a story for a very different day. But once I asked Owen what his resolutions were, it was a new year multiple years ago. And he told me that he wasn't a New Year's resolution person, and I didn't know that about him. But when I pressed him on it, he wouldn't even entertain the thought of having the discussion about what his resolutions were. And it really took me by surprise because I just couldn't imagine not taking the opportunity, for whatever reason, to overhaul my life for the better, just because it was something that I was so vigilant about for so long. But now, in retrospect, I think that conversation has been the catalyst for my reassessment of the idea of New Year's resolutions as a practice as a whole. So, let's talk about anti-resolutions. Why I am not a resolution person anymore. In recent years, I've come to realize how unhealthy my relationship was with goals. And now that I have stepped away from that, I find myself often contemplating how I got into that position. And I think that it's just a byproduct of being raised as an athlete and by athletes. I think that when you are pushing yourself at a high-performing level, you just are obviously always striving for the best for yourself. You always know the minute somebody asks you what it is that you're working towards, what your objectives are. So I just feel like that idea of setting goals and always having those in mind, I was just raised that way. And so I think that it took me a really long time to realize that my obsession with goals was actually making me very unhappy. I think that laser focus and dedication towards a goal ultimately led me to put blinders on to anything that was adjacent to that original goal, if that makes sense. Anything other than that original objective was not an acceptable outcome for me. And I think that is just a holdover from, in swimming in particular, let's just use this as my example because it is the example in which I come from. There's no gray areas. You either achieved your goal time or you did not. But the thing is, when you enter the real world or you step out of that type of athletic performance, all life is gray area. And so I think that it's just taken me years to realize that I needed to switch tracks in how I was setting goals, what my acceptable standards were for them. I needed to completely overhaul my concept of setting goals for myself. I think another instance of my unhealthy goal obsession actually comes with the story of hitting the road. Hitting the road from the time that Owen and I made the decision that it was something that we wanted to do full time, it was like a 2.5-year lead time. And I think that was the longest I had ever had a very specific goal that I was working towards. And then when I achieved it, I should have been so happy. And the thing is, do not get me wrong about that. But for some reason, as soon as I just always had this thing that I was looking towards that was helping me make every decision in my day-to-day life. And then when I achieved that thing, all of a sudden, I felt like I went into a period of mourning. I felt like I had no purpose anymore. And it was just this really bizarre feeling because, again, it should have been this time where I should have been over the moon that I had done 2.5 years of work and completely overhauling my life to achieve something. But like ultimately I was just left with this feeling of having no purpose. And so I think that was when I realized not only that I had a problem, that I actively needed to start doing something about adjusting my relationship and how I was going about thinking and planning my goals for myself. All right, before I get into what I would call my new approach to this anti-resolution time of year that we're discussing, I decided that I wanted to have an expert witness. So I decided to ask Torea Rodriguez. She is a previous guest here on Camp Nowhere, and she is an expert transformation guide. And I just felt like she was the perfect person to weigh in on this topic. And aside from all of that, Torea has been a huge catalyst in this specific area of my life for positive adjustments. And I just think that her insight is so valuable and will add so much to this particular discussion.
Well, hi, Camp Nowhere friends. Wow, when Mac put out a call to talk about resolutions, I was like, I got a lot to say about that topic because I think resolutions are complete bullshit. I said it. I don't like them. I don't like them because I fell for the trap of them. I feel like resolutions oftentimes are declared in very vague language, or can be made in very unrealistic time expectations. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, is that they're not super clear and we set these unrealistic expectations in terms of when we can accomplish those, because change definitely takes some time. And sure, there are some changes that we can make right away, but oftentimes those are like the lower hanging fruit type of changes. If we're wanting to make something that is a little bit more complex, for example, it might take a little bit more time. And so I think that resolutions in that way can kind of set up a lot of people for failure and frustration, which sucks. I also find that oftentimes they might be rooted in guilt or shame or obligation, or we're taking on a resolution because we think we should. And usually when we think we should, that's not something that's coming from inside of us. It's coming from expectations that we are taking on from outside of us. You know, it's like the classic example of, well, I became a doctor because my family wanted me to, but really I love law and I want to be a lawyer. You know, so it's those kinds of things are so rooted in resolutions that I find that it just makes it a kind of makes it a shit show, to be honest. And so the thing that I like to do at the beginning of the year, and frankly, any time of the year, anytime I'm setting out to do something, I like to set an intention. And setting that intention first allows me to get a sense of, and yes, it is vague. Most intentions are pretty vague, but it's a starting point. So it allows us to kind of set this direction. So if you think about going on a backpacking trip, oftentimes we set the intention, I want to go backpacking in a particular wilderness area, or I want to go to a particular part of the country. That's setting an intention. But then we can take that intention and get super detailed about, well, which wilderness area and which trailhead am I going to use and which backpack am I going to take? So it's that process of taking that more vague description and then detailing it down into actionable things that we can do to get us to the outcome that we set with that intention. And so I usually start with a lot of questions. I start with, what is it that I want to experience most this year? Or what is it that I want to experience most in the upcoming choose your own frame of time? And then I like to imagine my future self, or sometimes I'll call it my superhero version of myself, as a guide. I like to imagine who she is. And I like to step into her shoes. And so a lot of this is using my imagination. And sometimes I'm closing my eyes when I do this. Sometimes I do this when I'm out on a walk. But I want to imagine talking to her as if she is one of my best mentors. And so I'll ask her, what would she do if she was looking to achieve this thing or achieve this intention? What would she do? Where would she start? What habits did she embody to get there? Because she's the version who's already accomplished this, right? So she's got probably a lot of advice. What is the next immediate step I can take? And then from there, then I start to think about, okay, let's get super detailed. What habit supports this intention, or what habits are most aligned with this experience that I want more of? And those can be action habits. Those can be thought habits. Those can be language habits. Those can be relationship habits. They can be all sorts of things, but really thinking about what are those actions or what are those habitual things that I'm going to stack up so that I can get there. And then with habits, it's always very important. If we want to make them stick, we want to understand what is going to trigger that habit. And so I identify the trigger and then the habit itself. And then always I sandwich it with how will I reward myself for that habit, for some kind of stepwise completion. I want to be able to set myself up to get some rewards to be able to make progress, because perfection, I want to be really clear, perfection is not the reward here, because perfection is the lowest standard there is. It doesn't really exist, right? So that's where I start. And then when I'm thinking about an intention, the last thing that I want to say about this, when I'm thinking about an intention, absolutely do not consult your current circumstances when you're talking about your future. Because while those circumstances do exist, they don't actually shape the future perception of it. And so thinking about that intention, we want to remember to take ourselves out of our current circumstance. So that was a lot that I had to pack in there, but that is what I have to say about resolutions.
Thank you so much, Torea, for your insight. That was amazing, as always. I think that I have come a long way since the aforementioned unhealthy relationship with goals and resolutions. So now I kind of want to share what my approach is now. Instead of setting goals, I like to spend the end of the year reflecting and really actually not looking forward, but instead I try to spend the end of the year looking back. I'm looking at for any progress, wins, evolution, forward progression of any kind that has taken place in this last year. Because historically, I haven't been the best at celebrating wins if they fell outside of my original goal. So really and truly for these last couple of years, I've been hyper focused on just celebrating wins of any kind. I also just feel like it can be very difficult to see and feel and fully understand progress in the moment when it's happening. I think a lot of that stuff takes a little bit of like retrospective and a little bit of time and hindsight to be able to look back and really spot moments in your life where something good happened or you had progress, you had a win. And it's funny because I think a lot of these things are very hard for me to notice because I think a lot of times they're not immediately apparent as being something that is good. And I think that a good way of describing this is I think that sometimes things have to be bad. Like you have to fail. There has to be an issue, for me anyways, that I need to like examine and recover from, so to speak, for it to be, so ultimately it becomes like a good thing, if that makes sense. And I just think that it's impossible in the moment because a lot of these things are subtle and they take time. And I just feel like focusing on all of the good things just puts me in a great headspace. It makes me feel good. And when I see these positive things in my life, I just feel like you start to gravitate more towards doing more of those things if you spend time appreciating and celebrating all of the good that happened. So for me, I've definitely pumped the brakes on making actual physical written goals. So just to quickly summarize before we move on to some of my reflections from the year, I just like to take this time to look back and feel appreciative for what I have accomplished in every corner of my life, personal, professional, emotional, what have you. And I'm not really doing goals these days. Maybe that'll change in the future. But I think that because I had such a stronghold on very specifically defined goals for so long, I really have been trying to just take a break from that for a little while and just celebrate the small stuff. Because I think that by focusing on the good, naturally, I will continue to gravitate in that general direction. Before we get into some of my reflections for the year, I do want to say that I really just so enjoyed spending the time thinking about the long and complicated road that this year has been. It's so funny with like every passing year in my life, I feel like the challenges just get bigger and heavier. At the same time, these years get more and more rewarding. And I think that there's something to that. But this list, I would say, is just a small fraction of the things that I have reflected on and felt were wins, positive, good things that happened. It just makes me feel like my cup really does overfloweth, if you know what I mean. And so I just wanted to say just how thankful I am before we get into these more specific things. This episode of Camp Nowhere is brought to you by Red Arc. For the last 4 years on the road, our entire life has been running on Red Arc's power management systems. Whether we're charging our camera gear, powering Starlink for remote work, or making this podcast in the middle of nowhere, Red Arc always keeps everything running smoothly. They've spent decades perfecting their products based on customer needs, putting in countless hours to design and test the toughest mobile power solutions out there. Born in the rugged terrain of Australia, Red Arc has been leading the way in mobile power solutions for 45 years. For more information about reliable off-grid power, go to headnowhere.com/redarc, which can also be found in the show notes. Hey there, Mac here. I don't know why I said that. It's always Mac. Anyways, if you're enjoying Camp Nowhere, maybe you would want to consider checking out our Patreon. By joining, you'll get access to a ton of cool things, such as the ad-free version of this podcast, early screenings to our films, behind-the-scenes glimpses into life on the road, and a whole lot more exclusive content. Plus, your support helps us keep creating and improving as multifaceted storytellers. We legitimately could not do it without you, so a big thank you to everyone who has already joined us in our sunny little corner of the internet. If you're curious, take a spin around at headnowhere.com/Patreon. See you there. All right, here we go. So I think that the first thing that really jumped out to me is that this has been the most fulfilling year of my life, while also being maybe the most emotionally challenging year of my life. Those challenges in the moment definitely felt like low points, but ultimately they caused me to take time and deeply reflect on what I want my life to look like and feel like in the future. And in turn, I just feel like I have this sense of reassurance that I'm pointing my ship in the right direction, that I'm making my decisions and my alterations, my course corrections. And I know that no matter, even though I have no idea what's coming, I really have no idea what's coming or what I'm even doing, but I just know at the core of my being, because I have so much historical data to go on, that if I just continue to make decisions from a place of joy and excitement from the future or for the future, nothing but good is going to happen. And so I just think that there's something so beautiful that comes from experiencing very deep lows, also help you realize and fully enjoy the incredible highs of life, if that makes sense. All right. The next thing is I started this podcast. This was a huge multi-year goal for me. And the funny thing is, like, when I say multi-year goal, it's just something that I've been wanting to do for years. And I really never had any idea how to get started. And I'm just so glad I did, because I think in years past, I wouldn't have started because of how much I didn't know or how much I didn't understand going into it. And I think that all those question marks would have stopped me dead in my tracks, because I have a tendency to lean towards perfection. But one of the other things that I've learned is that you improve by doing. And so I pushed through a lot of discomfort to get this out into the world and a lot of self-doubt. But I did it in the name of pushing myself to be a better storyteller and a better creative. And I'm so incredibly proud that I had made it to this point, that I'm sitting here talking to you. Because I can already feel the improvement in all of the areas that I was hoping to at the onset of this project. And it's pretty wild that it really has not taken long to start to feel like I'm improving. And I think that just being able to see improvement in yourself it's such a rewarding feeling. And I know that it will just breed for more progression. So yay to that. So at the beginning of this year, the one thing that I felt like I had some form of a pseudo goal to work towards was to kind of work on my meditation practice. And it was really for the sake of getting better control over my mind and my anxiety when it crops up. And I'm going to be honest with you, my meditation practice has not improved much this year. But I think that the reason why I feel the need to bring it up is that I've actually gained a better understanding for my brain as a whole this year. And I can't exactly put a finger on how that has come to be, but I just feel like I understand how I work now. And now that I understand how I work, I have a much better understanding of what I can do for myself in the moments where it feels like my brain is becoming a runaway train. Even though meditation absolutely helps, I also just have a lot of other tools in my arsenal that I can use at my disposal to do essentially the same thing. So I'm calling that a win. The next thing is we incorporated so much more international travel into our lives this year, and it has been wildly rewarding. And I think it's also been a huge catalyst for a lot of growth for the both of us in more ways than I will ever be able to list here. This year, we traveled to Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, Canada, and now I'm coming to you from Japan. I just feel so deeply thankful for the life that we've built ourselves to allow for this kind of travel. I feel like it's made our travels in our home on wheels so much more rich. And I also just think that we're starting to get a more diverse perspective on the world, which I personally have always been hungry for. And I think that we will feel the repercussions of global travel and a more worldly perspective for years to come. And so I'm just like endlessly thankful for all the small decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis that allows for this, our work, and just having a partner who puts as much value in getting out and getting to know the world as Owen. Because I feel like it's one thing to want this, and it's another thing entirely to have a partner who also wants to do this. And it's just so rewarding to do this together. The next thing on my list is this year, very organically, I started reading a lot. I don't know how, And I don't know why this came to be, but at the time of this recording, so it's December 11th, I have read 42 books this year. That is a whole landslide more books than I have read in maybe years put together. And I think that I don't know where this came from. I just feel like all of a sudden I have this insatiable appetite for stories and information from all walks of life and people and perspectives. Like, I just am so hungry for more information, knowledge, perspectives. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why. All of a sudden this year, it's just shot through the roof. But this year, I have had the honor of collecting perspectives from scientists, Native people, artists, philosophers, historians, other travelers. And it has just been a very rewarding experience to add their perspectives to my own. And on a similar note, I've come to understand that just putting better quality information and inspiration into my sphere of consciousness also just feels like I get a better result out of myself as a creative who's also trying to put things into the world. And so I've placed a lot of importance on really heavily curating the information and the inspiration that I put into my system. All right, these last two are work-related. This year, I, along with Owen and Jackson, made 2 full series and a mini-series, one of which was our first network show. That was a huge goal of mine, and I accomplished it this year. This was something that I felt like was 5 to 10 years out. So it is kind of wild that it came to fruition and got made and put out into the world all in the same year. Like, that is truly mind-blowing to me. And in the moment when you're doing it, like, you just don't have that understanding that, like, holy shit, I've been thinking about doing this for so long. And here it is. Not only here it is, it's done. I am here talking to you from the other side of that project. It is done. It is almost entirely out into the world. And even though I can see and feel ways that it could do better, be better, I'm so proud of what we made and honored that we had the ability to bring these ideas to life. And not only did I have the ability to bring those ideas to life, I did it with 2 people that I deeply admire. That is another thing that's very important to me. I like working with people that I care about and admire their creative perspective. And it will never, ever get old to me, the fact that I have 2 people that I work very, very closely with, that I trust endlessly, and that we get to work together making things that I think are very beautiful. So thank you to Owen and Jackson for being such a big part of my year. Last but not least, this is a very recent realization for me. I've come to realize I lost my deep love of drawing years ago. I lost it to hustle culture. I think that this idea that everything that you're interested in, everything that you love should be a way of helping you make a living ultimately killed a deep joy I had for drawing. And thankfully, it's back. It's back in full force. And now that I've come back to it very organically and on my own, I now see the value and importance of having outlets of creative expression that are entirely for you and your soul. It just feels like an invaluable way of processing the world and what it is that you're ingesting that you find to be intriguing and inspiring on a day-to-day basis. And now that I understand that I have to hold some things precious to myself, I think that going forward, I will keep a much closer eye on what those things are and what I am allowing to be my professional work versus what is for me. Okay, I think that is more than enough for now. When I was discussing this particular theme idea for this episode of the podcast with Jackson, our producer here at Bound for Nowhere and Camp Nowhere, he shared his approach and think how he thinks about and prepares for the new year. And it is so funny. It just like hit me like a bolt of lightning how incredibly different he and I go about things. And I think that that is so cool. Like, our diverse perspectives are what make us unique and different. And I think that those things should be celebrated. And so it just felt like I would be doing all of us a huge disservice by only giving you my own personal perspective on this subject. So we're going to end this episode with anti-resolutions from all of you. But before I turn it over to you all, I do want to share one long-standing tradition of my family's. And this is something that we do daily around the dinner table when we're together. But it's also something that we use at the end of a trip to kind of summarize an experience. And it is also something that we do at the end of the year. And we call it high, low, and nugget. So the high is obviously your high of the year. Your low is obviously your low of the year. And then your nugget is something that you learned. All right. So here is my high, low, and nugget for 2024. I have 2 highs for the year. Our first is adding away from vehicle international travel to our repertoire of full-time travel. As I've discussed, it's just been incredibly rewarding, and it's creating a lot of like expansiveness in our life, and I'm very thankful for it. And then the second thing is the short trip that we took up to Alaska with my parents to see the family cabin for the first time. I have an episode of Camp Nowhere on it, if you care to take a listen. It was a very special trip. It was something that was a long time coming, and it was just a very rewarding, brief, however very rewarding experience. And I will reflect back on that trip, I think, for a long time. All right, my low for the year. This is only my low for the year because I had to pick one. And I realized that this year I operate out of scarcity mentality a lot. And I find that to be a huge bummer. It's stifling mentally, creatively, emotionally, and honestly, at its worst, it is the thief of my joy. But the reason why part of me didn't really want it to be my low is because now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. I know it. I see it. And it's something that I'm going to keep an eye out for the future. And I am definitely the type of person that once I just have to make a realization once, and then it won't be an issue again. But I just think it's a low because I think that when you have these realizations, it's often because it's taken you to a dark and unfortunate place. And I also can see in so many past experiences and frustrations and roadblocks I've hit were because I was operating from this scarcity mentality. And the thing is, like, it's a protective measure. So to some extent, like, you want to be thankful for the fact that you have these like instinctual things that are out to protect you. And really and truly, like, my scarcity mindset is I've just discovered that I love being a storyteller. I love that I have this outlet that takes on many different forms, and I just never want to lose it. Like, now that I know this, and now that I have the opportunity to do this, I never financially want to have to walk away from it. And the unfortunate part is that is a very real reality. It's tough sledding out there, being an independent, creative person. But the thing is, I have nothing but historical evidence that I have and will figure it out. So anyways, that's my low. My nugget actually came to me from learning to skate this past year. So I picked up skateboarding somewhat late in life, which is kind of embarrassing to say, but I realized as I was learning to skate, when I would try to do something new, it was so hard, scary, uncomfortable, like all of the things. And whenever I feel this like tenseness, it was just like, that was so scary. I don't really want to do that again. It's made me realize that when you hit those things that make you feel that way, that is exactly when you're being challenged and you have to keep going. So I came up with this, it's kind of a new rule for myself, and it is totally born through skating, is if something feels scary, I have to do it 3 times. And with skating in particular, I do it 3 times right then and there. If that hill was scary to skate down, 3 times. You're not done until you've done it 3 times. And so I've actually kind of applied that to all areas of my life. I didn't mention this, but I sat down to record the previous episode of the podcast, so Japan episode 1, and I realized how resistant I felt to sitting down and recording a solo episode. Just so much self-doubt, so much self-consciousness, so much frustration about feeling all of those things that I was like, okay, the next 3 episodes, they have to be solo because I just need to push through. And the crazy thing is, like, I don't know what it is about 3 times. After the 3rd time of skating down that hill, every single time I feel good about it, or I feel so much better about it. It's like, no, it's taken the sting and the fear and the trepidation out of it. And so that rule now applies to my life because I've come to realize how well it works. So the rule of 3, if something is scary, is my nugget for the year. And it's just something I've learned about myself. If there is one thing that people ask me more than anything else, it's how I store my clothes on the road. I have been using the same set of Eagle Creek packet cubes for the last 8.5 years. Since 1975, Eagle Creek has logged more miles and cleared customs more than anyone in the business. That hard-won insight is built into everything they make, from luggage to packing cubes and everything in between. In fact, I store my film in an Eagle Creek bag that was handed down to me from my grandmother who used it in her travels over 20 years ago. And guess what? It's still going strong. Check them out at headnowhere.com/Eagle Creek. As longtime fans of Eagle Creek, we're proud to have them as a part of our everyday life, but also as a sponsor of Camp Nowhere. 1 trekking pole. 2 trekking pole. I was just setting up my trekking poles because we are about to go for a hike, and I had a thought. I love my trekking poles so much. Just setting them up gets me so stoked to be out on trail. And I think that just having the right piece of gear for the job just kind of does that to you. It makes you excited to get outside and do what you love. As a self-proclaimed gear nerd, I have made detailed gear guides plus some handy affiliate links and discount codes for brands that we personally know, love, and trust. If you decide to grab anything from those links or gear guides, it helps support all of our creative projects that we're working on, from films to podcasts and life on the move. So, if you are gearing up for your next adventure, check it out at headnowhere.com/gear, and thank you so much for helping us stay rolling. Okay, gotta run. This trail is not gonna hike itself. All right, without further ado, thank you all so much for your incredible submissions. Here is what you all have to say for your anti-resolutions.
My name is Mike Schultz. I'm currently based in Washington, but was living on the road for 5 years prior. And my anti-New Year's resolution is more of a tradition that I picked up from a friend. Maybe it came from some old superstition, but the premise is to spend New Year's Day in a way you want your entire year to be like. Whether that's eating healthy, spending more time with friends or family, or just simply doing what you love. It just sets a good theme for the rest of your year.
Hi, Mike and Owen. I was inspired to write a poem for your anti-resolution podcast. So here it goes. The new year has come already. It happened oh so fast. Everyone is making promises to be better than their last. I've forgotten what I promised around this time last year. Was it to be a better friend or to be a better me? It's nice to reflect on where I've been and all the things I've done. Yet do I need to make strict promises? for they seem to come undone. Each year I know I grow a little, for we never really stay the same. Some years I know I grow a lot, as expansion is the aim. So this year, I'll be gentler to myself especially, for patience is a virtue, and change happens gradually.
So my name is Katie, and I live in Philly. Go Birds. I'm originally from the Northeast, but I moved out west as a younger person, and I spent a lot of time pitching a tent on public land and sleeping in the dirt because I love the outdoors, and honestly because it felt like the only thing I could really afford to do. And it's always been there, but those experiences really sparked a further love for camping, hiking, and just overall rugged adventuring. And during that time of my life too, I was living on the edge of a knife. I was so poor. I was simultaneously so scared of, but also completely enamored by the world that all I wanted was to have an adventure rig that no one could take away from me, a home that nobody could evict me from, a place where I knew that if I had the very real possibility of being unable to afford rent, especially in Portland, Oregon, I'd always have a roof over my head. And while the adventure part has always played a role, I think the honest to God reason I dreamed about owning a pickup truck was so that I'd always have a place to sleep out of the rain and, a place that no landlord could kick me out of. And, I think it's important to remember the reality that the majority of people who live in vehicles in this country do so because they have no other choice. And I think that's very different from, the life of digital nomading or full-time overlanding, which is what we see online. But I only bring this up because for so long, I dealt with feelings of shame that I couldn't live up to this standard. I was, quote unquote, overlanding in a 20-year-old Corolla that served me well, but did leave me stranded on the side of the road once in the Bighorn Mountains. Although that turned out all right. People are generally pretty nice and want to help out. So I started from the bottom and I've worked my way up, and this past year I hit a major milestone, one that I had been working on for about 7 years. I'm now the very proud owner of Wendigo. She's a 2022 snowy white SR5 Tacoma. And I'm absolutely head over heels in love with her. I still can't afford a truck cap. That's several more months of saving away, but she's the first step I've ever really had towards feeling a sense of autonomy. So this has gotten me thinking, what do you do when you accomplish a dream? I think you'll find that a lot of folks find it kind of odd. You're sort of like, well, okay, what's next? You get lost in the mundane again. You don't wake up feeling different. You still deal with the good and the bad day in and day out. And I've always had a bad habit of living in the future, hoping that if I could just get to this one milestone, this one place, if I have this much money in my bank account, I'll feel safe, that I can really start living. And once this happens, I'll be all set. So my anti-resolution for right now is to stop looking forward. Not forever, but just for this moment. Yes, it's on my mind, all the upgrades she needs to be livable, the cap, she needs better tires, a stove to cook food on, recovery gear for when I get stuck. But I was driving the truck recently, just doing errands, going about life, and suddenly it really hit me in the moment. I was like, yo, this is freaking awesome, man. I got a truck. I mean, she's not camp ready yet, but I'm driving her. I got automatic locks, I got automatic windows, I got cruise control, I got Bluetooth. I didn't used to have any of that. And see, this is why you got to drive the POSs, the beaters, so you don't forget where you came from. You get automatic locks and suddenly it's the greatest thing in the world. So I'm still looking towards the future though, of course. I got a big cross-country road trip planned next year. I'm hoping to point her west, not stop till I get to South Dakota, where I just imagine I'll wake up on the tailgate and I'll look out over sunrise on the Badlands, and I'll just breathe the biggest sigh of relief in my life that I've been holding in for years. So, anyway, maybe I'll see you guys down the road.
Hey, Mac and Owen. My name is Suzy, and I'm from Covington, Kentucky. And it's funny that you posted this today because I was literally just talking about this. But I personally feel like January is like the worst possible time that you could celebrate. I don't know, celebrate's the wrong word, but the worst possible time that you could have like a new year, like goal setting feeling or vibe. Like it's cold, it's dark, like it's just not the right energy for intentions. So I personally started doing a Q2 start to my year. So I feel like April is just like a much better time to be, if you want to set goals and that kind of thing. And I think it's totally respectable if you don't. But if you do, I think that April is just like a much better time to focus on, I feel like a lot of people's goals are centered around, I guess like habits and routine. And I just feel like January and February, it's just the wrong time. So anyway, that's my New Year's tradition, is that I just actually don't even think about it because I think my New Year's starts in April. And then another thing that I always say and kind of remind myself is that literally, if you could, like, the new year is just like your frame of mind. So in a way, like every next day is like technically kind of a new year if you really think about it. So that's just another one of my maybe kind of abstract thoughts on the new year. It's just that every day is a new year. But when I was having this conversation with my friends, a lot of people said that they felt like their birthday was kind of like their new year. So that's interesting too. I don't really see it that way. But anyway, hope this is helpful.
My name is Jennifer Upton, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And my anti-resolution each year, which I don't even like saying anti because I'm not against what someone else wants to do. But for me, I allow myself to be chosen by a word. And this started about 10 years ago for me when I felt like the word vulnerability was speaking to me. And so I spent that year being very intentional about being vulnerable. And I dug really deep into the word vulnerability because that's kind of not a word I think most people would want to be chosen by or to choose. And it changed my life. It changed everything about how I see the world. And so moving forward, each year I feel chosen by a word, and the next year the word was reframe, which has become my life word. Constantly reframing beauty, constantly reframing how I see situations in my life, because I'm someone who fights for joy every single day. And since then, it's always been another re-word every year. I've already found my word for this year, which is re-wild, which I'm not even sure if that's a word, but it's my word, so it doesn't matter. I get to make the rules, and I'm excited to see how it changes my life this year, because I know it will, because I believe there's power in words. And if we can just choose that one word, or open ourselves up to be chosen by a word, because I really think they choose us. I don't think we choose them. For me, it's been powerful. And I know a lot of people who do the same exact thing each year, and I've seen it also change their lives.
Hi, I'm Allie, and I'm from Baltimore. So we have a big year of change ahead for us as a family, a big move, plans for big travel, and lots of opportunities to adapt and be flexible. And for that reason, we aren't looking for any conventional New Year's resolution goals. This year is a bit of a social experiment for us, and as such, we're going to treat it that way. Our sole intention this year is to continue to come back to our home values and check in. Is what we're doing aligning with our family values, how we're spending our days, conducting our business, educating our children, exploring, always coming back to check in with ourselves and with each other. It's not a goal, it's not some measurable achievement. It's a conscious pause and a spoken promise to our life this year. No matter where it's taking us, that we'll be checking in and gauging where it falls in our alignment of our family. We've promised each other that we'll reassess along the way, make changes accordingly, not to tick off an achievement, but rather to keep in alignment with our ultimate intention to live our most conscious life. We're super stoked on this year. We can't wait to get started. Mac, thank you so much for setting this up. I cannot wait to hear all the incredible entries. It sounds like such a fun experiment.
Hey, my name is Anthony Natolo. The place I call home most of the time is Atlanta, Georgia. The way I took your prompt for an anti-resolution is to share one of my poems. I have a book of poems that I rarely read to anyone, and I figured doing something out of my comfort zone fits right into what you're looking for. So don't worry, it's very short. And it's called Window Flower. Oh, love, I know why the flowers I give you don't last long. Because you're too busy taking care of me and you. Well, my pitcher is full, what can I do? I'll fill our little cups to the brim too. With all that I have, all I can give, it won't be too hard because that little flower in the windowsill will wither, and together you and I will flourish in its stead. And sorry, those are my boys in the background, and those are actually the little cups that I just fill up with love. But thank y'all, and I hope y'all have a great new year.
Hey, Mac and Owen, it's Adam here from Bantha Overland. I'm located just north of Denver, Colorado, where I live with my wife Val and our rig, the Bantha. I have an interesting relationship with time. Over the years, I've gotten pretty angry at it, and I think your question about the new year, it's really about time to me, since time is a human creation. And, I feel like it's often a little too tight, and it just isn't as spacious as I want it to be to really enjoy the journey and enjoy life. And so I really like my work and my life to be spacious. And so there's a couple things that I have done over the years to make my life and work a little bit more spacious, and I wanted to share them here in case that's interesting or helpful for your podcast. So one of the things I like to do is I don't like the word planning, and I'm not a big planner. But there are some concepts I have come up with that let me still live life without having a plan, which feels a little tight to me. It doesn't necessarily allow the spontaneity of reacting to a place or a situation or a person. And so one of the ideas I use is I envision or I dream things instead of plan things. And so to me, the difference is that really lets me to think about what might be possible or what could be amazing without worrying about the reality of, well, how would I do that? And what's the plan? And what do I need to do to accomplish that? It's really just more about the why and the what. And I have found that over the years, the how always takes care of itself for me. And so when I dream and envision those things, I like to call them ready options. And so a ready option is like, I would love to go to Joshua Tree sometime in the spring, but I don't make a plan for it. And so it's really something where it can be a dream, it can be an option. Maybe I'll do a little research so that if I did want to say yes to it, I could, but I don't commit to it. I just sort of prepare for that option to be something I can pull at what I call the last responsible moment. And that's an interesting concept. The last responsible moment is really the last moment when you can say yes to something without causing a lot of harm. So for example, you could book airline tickets a year in advance, but maybe you could book them up to a couple days before your trip and there wouldn't be any price difference or any availability difference. And so the last responsible moment is really just a few days before your trip. And you can only create waste if you do it sooner than that moment, because your plans might change, you might get sick, you might not want to do it. And so I have turned procrastination into a good friend with the last responsible moment. Another thing I do to make my time in my life a little bit more spacious is that I just like to mess with the time expectations of the world. And so in my business and brand around Bantha Overland, where I'm making 3D parts and selling them online for camping and gear and stuff like that, or when I'm making YouTube content about how to get out there, work remotely, and spend more of your time playing in the outdoors, I like to do a little quarterly review for my business where I retrospect on the last 3 months, and I like to envision and dream about the next 3 months ahead, what's going to be fun, what's going to meet my financial needs and stuff like that. And so I actually do that quarterly cadence 1 month off of the calendar. So I start my year in February. So I do February, March, April, and then so on and so forth. And so when I end my year, the last quarter of my year is November, December, January. And so instead of trying to combine the holidays and the end of the calendar year and the start of the new year and everything with the end of December and the beginning of January, I just offset it by 1 month so that happens for me at the end of January and the beginning of February. And to me, it just sort of messes with time. There's not a lot of things going on in that time of year. And so it lets me feel like I can end things and begin things when I want to without all the pressure of all the other things going on in the world. So I hope something there is interesting. If it is, great. If not, that's great too. And I hope you're enjoying your travels, and I look forward to this episode of the podcast. Bye.
Hello, Camp Nowhere. This is your producer speaking. My name is Jackson Casimiro, talking to you from Portland, Oregon. And I am very much a traditional resolution person. I like making goals that are like specific and quantifiable and all that. And I'll give a piece of advice, but I think the reason why I enjoy it is I just have this mentality that it's sort of like this little mission. Like it's kind of gamified. Like I joke that I walked out of the theater seeing Agent Cody Banks like 15 years ago, and I'm still pretending like I'm a secret agent doing these fun missions. And that's just my mentality about doing these things that are kind of data driven and crunchy and all that. I'm kind of a maniac around habit tracking and all this stuff. And so you could try to have that mentality, but there is one thing that I encourage anybody doing a quantifiable goal to do, and that is set different achievement medals for the levels of achieving the goal. So let's say you want to bike 1,000 kilometers. We're going to call that a gold medal, but also set up a bronze and a silver at lower levels, just so that it's not all or nothing. And on the other side of it, you could set a platinum goal. You could say, hey, if I double this, I'm going to give myself a platinum medal. And you could even award these things retroactively. Like I'm looking at my 2024 goals, and there are things that I fell short of, but I put a lot of effort into, and I should be able to say, hey, I still deserve something for that. And I like that it's not saying, hey, I get half credit or quarter credit on this. There's still that positive connotation of awarding yourself a medal for trying and doing some self-improvement. And I think that's a nice way to think about it if you are going to do quantifiable goals like that, which a lot of other people in this episode have more romantic ideas than that. And I appreciate them. But for all of us data sickos, feel heard. I'm with you. So happy New Year, and I'm going to go polish my, bronze medal for the number of books I read in 2024. All right, bye-bye.
I'm Owen Chikazawa, and I'm Mac's partner, so I'm from nowhere in particular right now. I'm not necessarily anti-resolution, but I do think that waiting until one time a year to make a resolution seems a bit silly. Instead, I prefer to check in on a much more frequent basis and see if I'm coming up short in any particular area and then trying to correct from there. I think that artists have everything they make critiqued, so it's a process that I've grown to become comfortable in, and I think expanding it to life as a whole has helped me from staying stagnant, or at least I hope it has. And that's all I got for you. Is that okay, Mac?
Yeah. Thank you.